One of our core value and mission here is to really unlock energy agility, and the way that we do that is through load flexibility and just kind of preaching that narrative. The grid as a whole needs flexible loads, so the narrative that's kind of getting built right now is data centers are a problem, but it's really not data centers that are a problem. It's the fact that industries just aren't flexible. So there's a lot of power that's taken off the grid by loads that would consider themselves to be firm, or maybe they're loads that consider themselves to be flexible. But the way that I, as a startup trying to scale towards a very flexible energy future, their definition of flexibility is nowhere close to ours, because they are, hey, we got a phone call, we've got an hour to call up somebody and they're going to show up at the facility and start turning things off. I'm Dan Lawrence from OBM, CEO and co-founder, and today you're watching the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
Hi, it's Joshua Feinberg from the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, and today I'm welcoming Daniel Lawrence, who is the CEO and co-founder of OBM in Baltimore, Maryland. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Joshua. It's good to be here.
Good to have you here as well. So how did you start OBM? Is it something that you've been thinking about for a number of years? Were you always thinking about Bitcoin mining when you were in high school and college growing up, or was there something that happened early on in your career that set you on this path?
So I was a software engineer by trade for a long time. Went undergrad was all software. Went worked for the Department of Defense for a while. Ended up getting into the software space over there. Met my co-founder, and how did we get into Bitcoin mining and starting a software company from it? I would say full transparency here. It was a drunken conversation we had one night around, hey, you ever heard about Bitcoin mining? Yeah, I have. You want to do it? So we decided to do it. And fast forward, we ended up moving our machines. They use a lot of energy and generate a lot of noise. So we moved them, again, full transparency, to my dad's house about an hour outside of Baltimore, close to Pennsylvania. Introduced a 1 hour commute anytime we have a problem. So then we started building some software for remote management of it, and then kind of accidentally started a company. So it was a fun time, but we just wanted to save some gas. That was how we got here.
It's an interesting context as well, because in the current, I try to stay away from politics on this podcast as much as possible, but this is really the first current presidential administration that's all in on cryptocurrency. And you go back like 5-10 years ago, it was something that was a little bit more trying to figure out how to do it. So coming from a place where you spent so much of your early career in the federal government, really, really interesting pivot to see it become such a core part of what you're working on.
Yeah, learned a tremendous amount there. We got to build some software that got deployed, and it was really, really great at kind of data aggregation and data processing. So we were able to leverage a good chunk of that in building the software that we use. The way that our software kind of works is it goes out, gets deployed inside of a facility, which would kind of look like a data center, but generally they're a little bit more crude looking. And it collects a lot of data there about the machine's health, sends it all back home. We give you a web page to see it, and manage it, and control it. So a lot of lessons learned at the Department of Defense. Thankful to have had a time to work there and support the country.
Absolutely. So you were, the first couple of years when you were just getting started, you actually were running a Bitcoin mining data center yourself, and remote management was a huge problem. And that's what led to wanting to develop this platform to save to.
Yeah. Realistically, we started off just small scale. We really never got much larger than small scale. We had 10 machines. So when you think about Bitcoin mining, you picture probably facilities that have shipping containers out in the desert with 10, 20, 30, 50,000 all humming away, sounding like a million hair dryers all going off. We never got that big, but we needed the remote management just so we didn't have to drive an hour one way. There was one time where it was, I don't know, late at night, call it 10 o'clock. So Jake, he's my co-founder, sent me a text and he said, hey, looks like the machines are offline. No problem. So I got in the car, drove all the way out, and this was when Bitcoin took off. So machines, generally when you buy them, they're priced at a 12-month ROI. Bitcoin took off, so we were looking at a 30-day ROI. So downtime overnight was a big problem for us. We wanted to try to keep them up 24/7. So he said, hey, it's offline. I got in my car, drove all the way out there, fixed it, drove all the way back, and I got probably 15 minutes from my house, and he sent me another text and said, hey, are you still working on it? No lie, it's offline again. So drove all the way again. So 4 hours of driving to fix a simple problem. When you have a problem with your computer, Josh, what do you do first? Usually you reboot it.
Reboot.
So that's how you fix most problems with Bitcoin miners. So we just needed a way to remotely do that.
And then,
We stopped mining super early on and then realized that there was a need for the software. So we focused more on let's find a community, let's build a community, let's see if there's users out there and listen to the problems they've got. So now our users and customers end up shaping a lot of the platform. We don't mind too much anymore.
so when you and Jake were going through this with the crazy drives in the middle of the night, were you hanging out with other people that were going through this? Were there people that were saying, hey, this is what colocation is for, where you buy remote hands or something like that? Or was this really just, you were
We
originally building something just to solve your own problem?
That was realistically it. So we bought the machines, plugged them in, got a little bit addicted to it, and I think that since he and I were both software engineers, we're always looking for a way to, at the time, do something at home. He's got a family now, so he looks for a little less coding to do at home now. But back then, the objective was we work all day and then we want to build something cool at night. So we started building the platform, ended up realistically marketing on Reddit a little bit, making some Reddit posts to try to see if there were Bitcoin at the time, crypto money at the time. It was small Reddit communities, and we made some silly posts there, and eventually ended up closing a company that ended up being one of the largest publicly traded Bitcoin miners today. And it was all off of a consultant that they had that saw we have on the footer of our webpage made with heart emoji in Baltimore. And this consultant actually used to live in Baltimore. So he said, hey, we'll give you guys a shot. We did well. We doubled down on everything they asked for. And here we are running, I think, a little over 8 gigawatts of power of Bitcoin mining across the world, all through our platform, all controlled, monitored, data coming back every 30 seconds. It's been a wild ride since 2017.
So the first use case, aside from the two of you, was like a consultant who was working for the miner.
Yeah,
Kind of
that's
like
we had
actually
we had a
launching.
bunch of yeah, we had a bunch of hobby people use the platform over the years. Uh, wish we thought about pricing before we started putting a price on it, but that's what happens when you just start building stuff and you don't have the entrepreneurial background. So we just started building some software, and some users started to use it, and some of them ended up being pretty big. And once you get one big company willing to say, yeah, we use it, it validates you on the market, and other companies are more comfortable using it then too. So right place, right time, building in a niche market. And then that took us to this energy world. And that's where the platform really kind of evolved, and we pivoted a good bit.
Yeah, it seems like there were two really serendipitous things that happen. One is so many founders that I talk to come to me and they want channel partners. They want to build relationships with consultants and integrators and managed service, whoever they think has the client relationship that can help them scale a lot faster without necessarily taking on full-time sales talent and shifting from fixed to variable overhead. And then the second part, so you found it accidentally, which is super cool because it gives you leverage. Consultants rarely just work with one client.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then the second part, to get that first client to be willing to be a case study, is amazing, because in the co-location world, everything is based on NDAs and secrecy, and the likelihood of getting your biggest and your first client to be willing to share their story on your own page. It's amazing to be able to have had that happen so quickly.
Yeah, we're very thankful that we've had some great customers along for the ride that have been, sometimes they've even reached out and said, how can we help? Because this is where the analogy I always give is, when we walk down the street, if you ask 100 people 10 years ago, you're not going to find anybody that says they're mining Bitcoin. If you walk down the street today and you ask 100 people, you're still not going to find anybody that mines Bitcoin. We are not selling toilet paper here. There's not a whole bunch of users out there for it. So in this space where we really started, it was really key that the companies you work with, you try to find a way to support them and try to find a way to really make sure that they're successful. Because if they're not successful, now you got a problem where you got to build something yourself. And there are enough companies in the space that were starting to build their own things, and we kind of just came at the right time. And it was good good opportunity for us to get some momentum behind us and have people willing to support us and still support us today.
It's really interesting timing as well to be starting just about a little less than 10 years ago, because right now what I've seen the last couple of years is I see some crypto miner entrepreneurs that had facilities that are wanting to pivot into generative AI. I see some of them that were getting so much pushback from community that they want to push back from generative. They want to get into generative AI, which is crazy because there's just as many activists that are concerned about power usage, regardless of what the facility is actually being used for. And just in the last couple of months, I've had a couple people from mainstream companies, mainstream entrepreneurs that are pivoting from doing something related to crypto or power consumption or liquid cooling. Like it seems like the worlds are converging a lot more because there's so much in common with the struggles of a Bitcoin mining, a crypto facility, and a generative AI data center.
Yeah, fully agreed. We've got a good chunk of our customers are starting to pivot to a diverse fleet where it's not necessarily Bitcoin mining machines that go to the new megawatts of power that come online. They're starting to ask themselves, how do I make the most off of the electron that I'm about to take off the grid? And historically that was Bitcoin mining, but now during periods, it will be generative AI running GPUs and training and running inference workloads. The other point of convergence that we are seeing a lot is it's becoming kind of like a co-located AI and Bitcoin deployment is what we're seeing some of our customers start to do. So if you have a, say, 100 megawatt interconnect, so you're able to take 100 megs off the grid, and you're going to deploy a AI factory. That load profile, we put it all into the data center category, but data centers historically are very flat. You're running web pages, the servers are always kind of using the same amount of power, but these workloads, when it comes to AI factories, they are bursty. It depends on if it's a training effort and are we flat now? And once the training stops, it falls back off. So the load profile is more spiky rather than a firm flat data center load. So we always try to separate just data center versus AI factory. But the place where co-located loads is becoming very interesting is for something to be a good resource to the grid. A flat load profile is pretty good because the grid knows what it's going to be able to get from you. If you're 100 megs of power and it is flat load and the grid ever needs 100 megs of power, it knows it can call you, Josh, and say, hey, I need the power. You've been using 100 megawatts flat. You turn off and I get 100 megawatts I can play with to support the grid and keep people's lights on. With the burstiness and peakiness of AI data centers, it's hard to make it a really reliable grid asset. So the co-located stuff that we see is Bitcoin miners co-located with AI factories, because when you're not rented or you're not training or you're not running an inference workload, you're flat and something else can consume that power too off that same interconnect and flatten your load profile out. So fill in all of those valleys and make a very flat, consistent load profile that is a good resource to the grid.
Are you seeing a significant amount of your crypto installed base now running in reasonably traditional co-location facilities?
You're talking about like on a traditional data center colo thing?
Multi-tenant, yeah.
Multi-tenant. So we have a wide spectrum of customers, I would say. Some are deployed on their own hardware, their own sites, their own land, their own containers or buildings, their own machines. Other people take more of I'm really good at finding land, I'm really good at finding power. I can build a building, but it's not going to be my machines inside of it. So we see generally both of those. I think the hosting model has generally gotten harder over time because you're fighting for margin and you're sharing it with your tenant, and that's the tricky part that a lot of Bitcoin miners get into right now. So price of power is key. Bitcoin price is down right now, so they're getting really trying to find the cheapest power, and often that's not with a hosting opportunity, just because you're competing with your landlord on the power. That's where the margin is.
Yeah, it's super interesting because the first scenario you described almost sounds like a wholesale data center provider or like a data center developer, where they find the land, they build the shell, and they sell the shell to a single tenant, a hyperscaler, anchor tenant, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's so on the AI side, I think that model is becoming a lot more prominent. On the Bitcoin side, the hosting model is tough right now because margins are so tight. So when we have Bitcoin miners turning AI factory deployers, we've got probably a couple customers that have decided to deploy their own GPUs. We have other ones that I think have found scalability and I'm just really good at land. I'm really good at power. You tell me what kind of cooling you want, and I'll build that out. And then they strike a multi-billion-dollar deal with a hyperscaler, and they basically hand them over a perfectly controlled room with stuff that can be connected up. So servers go in it, and it blows my mind when we go to see some of these facilities, and it's just so much stuff outside of it. And then you walk inside in this little shell inside the middle, and it looks like you're just in an empty office space, and that's about it with a raised floor. And everything outside of it's just piping and just crazy amount of stuff. But it all comes down to just this vacant office space that's going to eventually have servers in it. And that's where the Bitcoin miners that we have, they're starting to sell the power that they've got, sell their interconnect positioning where they're ready to take power, sell the substation that just got built out rather than deploying our own hardware and generating revenue off of it ourselves. Let's bring somebody in and share off of it. So GPUs and AI seem to be the highest margin business opportunity for them right now.
Do your users tend to profile more like tech entrepreneurs, or is most of the decision making so capital intensive that VCs are involved, private equities involved, and the ones who are really deciding what to do with management?
The from the Bitcoin space, there's a lot of VCs involved. I think it's still capital intensive up front to build something out. So we're generally working more with the operators and the people that have identified the fact that load flexibility can be an asset to the grid and then also a really strong revenue stream and profit driver. So our conversations that were historically when Jake and I first started operator focused, we're talking to the guys that are running the site and they need a way to run it better or run it remotely because they want to be able to manage machines from at home. Now we're still selling to them, but we're also selling to the business minded folk because this is really it adds to the top line if you're able to add load flexibility and optimize energy consumption. So our target audience has changed a little bit. We're always going to try to appeal to the operators, but it's the business people that have an energy mindset that we are generally trying to talk to.
And ironically, there's been all of this movement in the last couple of years in traditional data centers for lights out, fully automated data centers that run with agentic AI. And that's part of the reason why the activists are like, okay, you're taking all our power, you're taking all our water, you're going to generate some taxes, but where's the jobs?
It's definitely an evolving landscape. We've started to use some AI internally to help with some of the engineering side, and I always use it for market research. And it's a nice tool, but I can definitely see the concern. As a software company, I don't want to feel like there's eventually going to be some AI model out there that could build what we built in a second or two. That would be unfortunate for us. So we support the industry, but also want to make sure that we don't have to worry about something running better software than we do.
Have you found as you've built and scaled OBM that there's a significant amount to get involved at a broader level with supporting your clients, like their user groups, conferences, community forums, like education, partner enablement? Any of that tend to come up, or is it a lot more straightforward that they're figuring out most of those other support needs with other ecosystems?
So the drum that we're generally beating now is around load flexibility and optimizing energy use to drive revenue and protect profit. So the people that we're generally approaching, we go to a lot of energy conferences, we go to a lot of demand response conferences. We do have very strong relationships with the virtual power plant, demand response aggregator partners of ours, and also suppliers, the people that actually sell the power to the data center or miner that's actually running. They need a supplier for power. So we end up going to a lot of very power focused conferences and meets. And that's where we are preaching load flexibility and what it can do to the grid and how there's a lot more value left on the table in data centers and how they participate and serve as an asset to the grid. There's also a lot of value in, from a supplier perspective, the people that are actually selling the electricity to the electricity consumer. There's a lot of value and flexibility there too that's often untapped. So we are going to conferences and talking to power partners and power prospects, trying to just get them to understand the value of flexibility. And it's not just a grid asset, it's also a way for suppliers themselves to even drive revenue to themselves rather than just selling power on a megawatt hour basis. There's a revenue lever that they can pull there if they're able to work with the facility, work with the people that are taking power, and leverage the power that they would have been using. So that's generally the narrative that we're preaching right now. A lot of conferences and preaching load flexibility.
Is anyone coming to you talking about doing some behind the meter kind of projects where they're not dependent on grid, or is that it's just so power intensive that right now it's just not practical?
There's actually a good amount of conversations we have around behind the meter. So the only part that it comes down to really is the load profile. And if you're able to be flexible, my hot take is I think that just load exposed to the grid, forget about batteries, forget about behind the meter gen. I think that Bitcoin mining is it's very load flexible. That industry's proven itself. With the data center side, still viewed as firm load, and I think there's a lot of flexibility there that could be untapped. So when we talk to, if we get approached by somebody that says, "Hey, I'm going to be co-located. I want to deploy behind the meter. I want to be at a wind asset." How willing are you to curtail? Our best success, we actually just had this recently, is we have a customer that has up to a 60 meg. It actually goes a little bit higher wind asset, and it is in a part of Texas, part of ERCOT, in the Panhandle, where there's often a lot of congestion. There's a lot of wind that blows, which means too much power is going to the grid, and now pricing might skyrocket or pricing might tank. If there's too much power on the grid, ERCOT will try to incentivize people to take it by lowering the price. If things become cheaper, we buy more, right? So, but the problem is, if you are a wind farm and you have no load there, you're just always a power producer, you're going to be possibly selling at a loss. If ERCOT says, "Look, I've got too much power. Look, nobody's taking it. Look, I'm going to go negative and actually effectively charge you if you're going to keep giving me power." So now you've got this wind asset that's actually a loser rather than something that's always supposed to be selling for a profit. So that's where Bitcoin mining historically has been great, because it's a very flexible load. You're able to turn it off, and it's not like your Netflix video starts refreshing and loading at the key part of Stranger Things season 5. Hopefully you're watching it, Josh. So last thing you want to do is interrupt people that are watching their shows or browsing Google or anything. So Bitcoin mining is great. You can turn it off and there's no end user impact. And what we do for that customer is, they wanted power. The wind plant also wanted a partner, somebody that can take the power at a price that's not just the grid set price. So now you've got somebody that can say, "Well, I'll always take the power at 3 cents. So now if pricing ever goes below 3, you're making money off of me because I'm paying you more than you would have if you were selling to the grid negative." And what that means is the load has to be super flexible. So they use our software. We are holistically just looking at the wind production and managing the Bitcoin mining load to match the wind production based on pricing and the availability. So it's very, very flexible, but the behind the meter route only works if it's wind or something that's intermittent. Solar, not necessarily always going to be providing the same level of output. The load has to be flexible too for it to be a great part. And a traditional data center probably might not like that if they're trying to be fully behind the meter. But I think that there's load flexibility in traditional data centers, and I think there's a lot of load flexibility on the generative AI side that people right now are just so hesitant to approach, because they are saying, "Hey, we're making a ton of money here, so let's not worry about it yet." You look at companies that are billions and trillion-dollar valuations now just because they're building an AI product, and it's hard to say, "We're going to turn it off sometimes," but that narrative will become forced if they don't get there themselves.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
So much of your narrative and value proposition is focused on the load flexibility with cryptocurrency entrepreneurs. Are you getting anyone reaching out to you that wants to see if OBM will expand into working with AI factories, generative AI type of applications?
We do. We do. So we actually built a little over a year ago, actually, we built a product for Pause-less AI curtailment. So the problem that we run into is we would approach a AI factory and they would say, well, we can't pause because there's this concept of checkpointing. You can kind of view it as like saving state. And at the time, infrastructure, they took a little bit more of a lower cost approach. So saving state in the game, like when you're playing in Sonic and you cross the little checkered flag or the little checkpoints that ring every time you run by them. And if you die, you can come back to them. That's kind of what a checkpoint is when you're doing like a training workload. And sometimes that checkpoint, it could be time intensive because you're kind of pausing everything and then saving it all off in case we take something. So that if we hit a power outage, we don't lose 2 or 3 hours of compute before. So if we're rolling back to our last checkpoint. So we said, well, let's find flexibility here, and we want to make the load curtailable, and we don't want to have to just say we're going to have to start saving a lot more, because then you're going to be pausing constantly just to keep saving. So there's this balancing act. So we said, let's build a pauseless approach. And the way we kind of do that is it's like you're in your car and it's in drive. You hit the gas pedal and you're moving forward. You take your foot off the gas pedal, you're still in drive, but now you're just at a slow roll until you tap the gas pedal. That's kind of what we do with GPUs to make them responsive in a pauseless way. So we're effectively letting them run full performance. And then if there's ever a need to reduce power consumption or try to be flexible, we can back them way down in a way that doesn't require you to shift it into park or actually have that state saving stop the world operation. Just slow it down tremendously. And that gives like 80% of the power back within a second. The GPUs and their workloads are very, very flexible. So that could be 100 megawatt site, 80 megawatts up and down within a second. It's very fast. It's faster than how quick Bitcoin mining moves. So we are kind of preaching that narrative and trying to get some adoption. I think it's generally they find it more interesting around public perspective and PR. We don't want to end up looking like Bitcoin miners that are boiling the oceans and wreaking a power crisis on the grid. They don't want to look that way, so they're trying to embrace a little more flexibility up front. But they're fighting around just they're making so much dang money. So we are seeing a lot of regulatory changes that are starting to delay them taking power or mandating at a certain size threshold, you're going to have to be flexible. And that's when I think the market's going to change a little bit. And fast forward another year or two, margins will be less. There will be more GPUs online. People are going to be fighting for the same margin that Bitcoin miners are fighting for today. Just it's going to come eventually. And at that point, energy costs are going to start to really, really creep up. And load flexibility will be key to keeping the industry going. Just they're kind of running the way Bitcoin mining was running back in 2016, 2017. Nobody wanted to turn off. We're making a ton of money. Now we're in 2025. And if you don't turn off, you're dead. You have to control your energy costs.
So many interesting compare contrasts between the crypto operator and the traditional data center operator. One of things that I'm curious about is in the data center industry for the last couple of years, there's been this narrative that not only is there a scarcity of land with the right power, but there's also a scarcity of talent. And you go to any mainstream data center conference and you don't have to look far to realize that the majority of the people at some of these conferences are very close to retirement or at the age where there's a significant amount of concern that who's going to run this industry in 10 years? But at the same time, there's a lot more automation. So there's all these grassroots movements. Do you tend to see the crypto industry tend to be a little bit younger, not as Gen X, not as boomer centric?
It's surprising. So the people running the companies, the business side, I would say probably a little more on the younger side, but the people running the facilities, the actual boots on the ground, it's a mix, because often you find a Bitcoin mine located at some stranded asset. Maybe it was a steel plant in the Rust Belt in the middle of Pennsylvania that used to be the heart of a small town, and all of a sudden the steel production left, and now you've just got a massive substation with no taker. So we see some very interesting sites, and when an industry leaves and another modern industry comes in to take the power that used to be taken by something else, the people that run the site, when you go there and you talk to the Bitcoin miners, they are, hey, I used to work at the steel plant. I used to work there for 30 years, and then steel left, and now we're here, and we take stuff off the shelves and put it back on the shelves. And it actually has been great at kind of reinvigorating the local job market there, because otherwise, without that, the heart and just the lifeline of the entire community was that large plant. And now without it, those people end up having to find other jobs, and it's sometimes hard depending on where you're located. But if you have somebody else come in and take the power, it gives you a second shot at a new opportunity with just a little bit more of a modern facility. Data center side, it's the AI factory side, our customers that are taking more of like a powered land approach, and we'll build the shell and you can come in and put your hardware here. It's the same people that are going to be maintaining a lot of that infrastructure. Some of them are coming in with some specialized skill sets, but the people that sometimes end up just running the facility from an operations perspective, it's the people that were running the Bitcoin side from an operations perspective. So it's the same type of people, I think. We're thankful that we've got a diverse user base, and it helps us build it for kind of both people in the spectrum there.
So given the job creation and so many people at the early stages of their career wanting for more internships, and at least the PR narrative in the industry is wanting for more talent, what advice would you give to someone that's high school, college, teen, early 20s? Maybe it's a son, daughter of a neighbor or coworker that is thinking about career options. They're curious about infrastructure. They're curious about crypto. They're curious about data centers. They're a little bit interested in engineering and development, but they tend to sense that they want to do something more with soft skills. What would you talk with him or her about to be thinking about for career opportunities? When I was looking at your LinkedIn, I think I saw somewhere that you were fortunate enough that you had a recurring internship that ended up being your first job. Where you stayed a huge part of your career. A lot aren't quite as fortunate. What advice would you offer to someone in the rapidly changing world that we live in right now?
I think the most valuable thing is if you open the newspaper and you read about something, you're probably going to find about the power crisis that we stand to face. The fact that a lot of grids are at capacity. This is the first time ever where we have portions of the grid that are like in PJM. So that's the ISO that I'm a part of. It's moving to a bring your own capacity, so your own gen, or a non-capacity back load, which means they might not have the power for you, which means you're going to have to curtail. So the grid is starting to get exposed, and also exposing itself to a requirement that the people that start to take power have to be flexible. That is a problem that I think we're all feeling. I think a lot of ratepayers are starting to be concerned. All this power and everything, is my power price going to go up? How's that gonna affect me? Are these data centers going to offset my rates? Am I expected to pay more just to have my heating and air conditioning running? So the grid is just front and center, top of mind, I think, for a lot of people right now. So if it's a new professional trying to figure out how can I kind of connect with this space and bring some unique value, the most interesting thing that we see is when we talk to a lot of these industries, we learn they don't really understand the grid. They don't understand the value of demand response. They don't understand the value of optimizing energy costs and load flexibility. So understanding not just how that industry works, but how it interacts with the grid, and how load flexibility can really set that asset apart. It's not just a consumer of electricity, it's a grid asset. So a little less focus on uptime, cooling, hardware hygiene, they're all important, but understanding how real-time pricing works, how energy markets work, how demand response programs function, how automation ties it all together, that's going to be a very large career accelerator, because there's a lot of people that are in the Bitcoin space, in the crypto space, in the data center space, in the AI factory space that just don't understand the whole thing. And engineering can build solutions, we build solutions for it, but somebody has to understand what we're selling and the problem that we're solving. And a lot of people don't quite yet. Load flexibility has been an option, and now it's becoming like a mandate from the grid itself.
I mean, where do you learn this? Are there multidisciplinary degree programs? Can someone go to University of Maryland or Johns Hopkins? Is there some kind of diagonal kind of program that pulls all of this together? Is it a lot of creative? I mean, the data center industry still hasn't even caught up. You're probably about an hour and a half away from where Northern Virginia community has the data center program. There's literally only half a dozen programs in the entire country where you can study data centers. Where does someone learn about this without getting like a PhD in electrical engineering?
So it's able to be learned. 2 years ago, I never thought anything about the grid, had no idea how the heck it works. Sometimes I would turn my light switch on and it doesn't respond, and that's because maybe there's not enough power. But to me, this world didn't exist. Every time I turn the lights on, my AC is always pumping, the lights are always on, everything's always good. But there's a massive amount of orchestration, automation, and there's markets and everything that come into play. And that's all behind the scenes, not generally exposed to us as consumers. We just want consistent, reliable power. And I am at least able to act the part now, and that's not from a program, that's not from any kind of college opportunity or boot camp or anything. It all for me came from webinars, podcasts, signing up for newsletters. If you're interested in demand response, or you're interested in kind of cost optimization, demand response companies, what's the best way for them to sell demand response services? Give you a newsletter that explains exactly what they're doing. So they're kind of selling you indirectly. And I am a sucker for signing up for something, and I'm happy to read anything somebody's going to put in front of me if it teaches me something. So I was able to kind of go from zero to, I wouldn't call myself a hero, but maybe a hero actor within a couple of years. And that's just reading kind of newsletters that come out, weekly digests, anything on any of the utility-based platforms, watching webinars, listening to podcasts. They're all great ways to really just get an understanding of how the grid works and the value of it. And that's something that if you were to walk into an interview and somebody says, what sets you apart from the other 500 software engineers we're interviewing? Well, I have an interesting power background too that I can provide that'll, I think, give us a competitive edge on how we run this facility. So those things you can definitely self-teach. You don't have to let a PhD in electrical engineering be the inhibiting factor. I would say unneeded to bring enough value to stand out.
It sounds like too, by the time higher education catches up to be able to offer this program,
we're either going to have power or we're not.
I have 2 teens, and the K-12 school districts by us are still vilifying using ChatGPT. So very far away from being to the point where the high school teachers and the college professors are providing value for current job marketable skills.
Yeah, fully agreed. I try to limit my amount of time that I watch any socials, but I sometimes end up on YouTube watching the shorts and seeing how people use AI in the middle of a classroom to take a test or something like that. We are at the point where things could go the wrong way real quick.
Yeah, the whole system needs a big reboot.
Yeah,
to stay relevant. Dan, when you look at what's going on at the industry level, if you look at what's going on in the adjacent data center industry level, what do you think is the biggest problem that everyone is overlooking that you've found a solution for? Is it really all about load flexibility? Is there something else?
I think it's Probably the fact that a lot of the leaders of that industry are treating energy as more of a fixed cost rather than a dynamic opportunity. They build budgets and make some kind of static assumptions based on how are we going to just manage our cost and our cost exposure. And they miss the ability that managing costs and being load flexible could actually be a very large revenue driver. The most competitive data centers of the future, in my opinion, are the ones that are able to use energy as a revenue strategy. So if you look at, I think Meta made an announcement recently that they were stepping into the power trading space, and they're realizing that, wow, just the amount of power that we're going to take, there's a lot of opportunity on hedging, not hedging, being responsive, and that all comes down to a power trading desk and ultimately being able to control the load and making it flexible. So there's a lot of money left on the table with the very traditional mindset. Let's just manage costs and we're going to be a flat data center. If you approach an AI factory with a data center mindset, you're going to leave all that flexibility based revenue on the table. And that's something that we really specialize in. We are selling the software that makes it flexible and able to respond to those conditions. So we end up connected with a bunch of utilities. We're regulated areas, deregulated areas. We are global, so we get a lot of exposure to a lot of power markets. And if you're building an AI factory or building a data center in a new area, the last thing you want to try to do is figure out, well, how am I going to integrate with this small mom and pop shop utility that's going to be possibly calling me up and saying, hey, need you to shut down in an hour. So we specialize in solving all those problems. So ideally, it's you just build the facility out, we make it flex, and any data center that's able to embrace flexibility out of the gate is going to stand to have a very significant competitive advantage long term.
It sounds like this way of thinking has some parallels with a category of data centers entrepreneurs that I come across in Europe that I've seen very little in the US, and that's the colo entrepreneurs in Europe that are all in on heat reuse, where they have like a greenhouse right next to the data center, or a pool that gets heated by the data center, or a building that gets heated by the data center, and they're effectively providing free energy.
Yeah, the objective is we're trying to drive and protect profit. So if our cost of electricity ends up flat, let's just say we're profitable at 5 cents or less per kilowatt hour, $50 per megawatt hour. If we're profitable there, and all of a sudden our business economics change, maybe that's for an AI factory, more GPUs came online, so now people are just paying less for the GPUs as a service. Or if you're a Bitcoin miner and it's the halving hit, which is every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that gets emitted gets halved. So it's becoming more scarce over time. So that just changes business economics entirely. So if you're at a fixed power cost and all of a sudden your business economics change, now you need to find another way to protect profit. And that's where you can get better about your energy strategy, trying to turn that into a revenue stream, or what else can we do with the byproducts of whatever we're making here. And we've seen Bitcoin miners who are generally, I would say, having the most pressure to fight for margin. And we've seen them actually do exactly what you say, the heat byproduct. We've seen it go to pepper farms or shrimp growing. It's a ton of interesting ways that the byproducts end up getting used. Somebody was talking about, I think it was whiskey production. The heat seems to be another revenue stream. And I think that Bitcoin miners are still trying to find ways to unlock that, but data centers will or could eventually be in the same boat where there's a lot of heat that comes off. What can we do with it? Let's bring somebody in and let them take the heat and do something. And now we've got a new revenue stream that helps us protect profit.
And it's exactly the two-pronged conversation that I've had with the founders, these essentially colo operators that are all in on heat reuse. Is interesting. 2 out of 3 of them come from like investment banking backgrounds. So they understand that in Europe, there's the sustainability directives and the social good part of this, but at the end of the day, it has to make financial sense as well. In the US, there's not as much push on this, the social benefit and the sustainability part, but who doesn't pay attention to power cost? Of course they pay attention to power cost.
Exactly. I saw something very recent on LinkedIn. I think there's a moratorium on data centers in a certain part of the world over there where, um, because they're so focused on sustainability, that if it's just categorized as a data center, you're not going to connect and take power. And the way that people are working around that is, or working with that, I would say, is focusing more on the heat capture. So this is a source of heat that can fuel industries rather than this is just a load on the grid with no other benefit other than taking power.
Yeah, I find increasingly a lot of, given that it's the Data Center Go to Market podcast and the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, I have a lot of conversations with marketing executives and founders who get frustrated because the media does like a hit piece on the industry and they're throwing the whole industry under the bus. I'm like, you can have your own blog and your own podcast and your own YouTube channel to sell your side of the story. You don't necessarily need to sell a mainstream journalist uncovering your exact angle. Like, yeah, I know, but it's actually really interesting how, especially in the US, there is a lot of internal politics that goes into the pros and cons of them having their own media and who's allowed to talk about these topics. And especially among the data center operators, there's a lot of controversy in even how they address the messaging around this. But I see increasingly a lot of data center developers putting resources into marketing to community stakeholders beyond traditional personas, like caring about educating and building trust with elected officials, utility companies, regulators, and of course, activists.
Yeah, fully agreed. So we unfortunately, we have to fight a tough industry narrative all the time. Bitcoin mining has been viewed as bad for the grid, and people are starting to view AI factories as also bad for the grid. We end up having to do a lot of podcasts or participate in panel discussions at conferences just to help set the narrative straight that a flexible load is great for the grid because what it gives you is the opportunity to actually benefit the ratepayer by. So an example in ERCOT, the ISO that runs most of Texas, there's this site designation to a load called a controllable load resource, CLR. And historically, the way that ERCOT would run is if they're trying to manage supply and demand on the grid, they had one lever they could effectively pull, we'll call it, and that's pricing. So if I need people to turn off because I need more power, I'm going to elevate the price. Or if I've got too much, if there's a congestion or transmission problem, I'm going to elevate price, try to get people to come off, or I'm going to lower the price and try to get people to come on to take the excess. So they've really only had really one lever that they can play with, but controllable load resources give the ability for them to elevate or decrease the pricing. And at the same time, as part of that grid management effort that happens every 5 minutes, it's called SCED. As part of that, they can elevate or decrease pricing. And now with a controllable resource, they can also dial down loads directly and they have to respond within 5 minutes. So now they're able to control loads while manipulating pricing. So if you end up in a situation where there's more flexibility and every single industry is flexible and able to be controlled, ERCOT no longer is elevating and decreasing pricing. They are just flexing loads. So it actually leads to price flattening, which benefits people that are large power takers because now they don't have to deal with the involatility of a pricing market that doesn't have enough control levers. Now ERCOT's able to control it and flatten the price. So ideally, we fast forward, everybody's flexible, everybody's connected to the grid, and it's flattened the rates that we all pay.
Is this approach unique to Texas or are other states starting to emulate?
Texas is interesting. ERCOT, it's there, a lot of innovation happens there. It generally, you can kind of view it as like an independent grid. It does have the ability to take power and move between SPP, but they kind of like to solve their own problems and they don't necessarily leverage the fact that we can move power heavily between MISO or PJM. So ERCOT, a lot of creativity that happens down there. And a lot of it's exacerbated by the fact that there's a large deployment of batteries, there's a lot of renewable power, so much wind, so much solar. That just brings a whole lot of volatility that a lot of other grids don't necessarily experience. Plus, you've got a overarching weak transmission system, and a lot of this renewable power is produced out in West Texas, and you literally, if you were to view transmission as like a hose, the hose isn't big enough to get the power from West Texas to the cities that might need it, Dallas or Houston or wherever it might be. So you've got a ton of power in areas you can't get access to, which causes a lot of volatility. So ERCOT's kind of forced to do a lot of innovation right out of the gate. That, I think, kind of sets the pace for a lot of the other grids respond. PJM move into this non-capacity backed mindset, which is basically forcing flexibility because they might not have power to cover you. New York just did a kind of overhaul to how they handle participation. There's this DER model, which is aggregating a resource and putting it into all three markets, capacity, energy, or ancillaries, all as one load that New York can now control. Things are becoming more flexible, and people are getting incentivized to embrace flexibility, and grids are generally building flexibility and all the new innovative efforts that they're pushing forward.
Final area I wanted to ask you about today is your thoughts on where you think growing a company like OBM may change in the next 2 to 4 years. Do you see some trends with the kind of users? Do you see trends with regulatory environment, utility environment, adjacent interests in generative AI? What do you think looks the same? What do you think changes about what you spend your time on in the next 2 to 4 years?
So we wake up every day, and one of our core values, our mission here, is to really unlock energy agility. And the way that we do that is through load flexibility and just kind of preaching that narrative. The grid as a whole needs flexible loads. So the narrative that's kind of getting built right now is data centers are a problem, but it's generally not data centers that are a problem. It's the fact that industries just aren't flexible. So there's a lot of power that's taken off the grid by loads that would consider themselves to be firm. Or maybe they're loads that consider themselves to be flexible, but the way that I, as a startup trying to scale towards a very flexible energy future, their definition of flexibility is nowhere close to ours, because they are, hey, we got a phone call, we've got an hour to call up somebody, and they're going to show up at the facility and start turning things off. That's how steel, cold storage, wastewater, a lot of the chemical manufacturing, they would call themselves flexible because they can respond to a light that turns on, or they can respond to a phone call or an email dispatch. But what I would consider flexible is, can you do everything different within 5 minutes? And if you can't, it's because you're not automated and you're not as good of a resource as you could be. So I think that for our business, we're really focused on how do we solve these energy problems in industries that expand beyond just data centers. It's not a data center or AI factory problem that we're solving right now. It is the fact that just the grid needs more flexibility, and the AI factory constraints that we hear in the news a lot, those all go away if everybody else is just a lot more flexible. So it's really a flexible future. Our company is hyper aligned on adding more value through flexibility to any type of industry. So really for us, the platform as we build it over the next couple of years, it's going to continue to be very energy focused. Just we are really more of like an aggregator of signals, an aggregator of data about the grid, pricing, demand response events. We aggregate all of that together, and then we control something in response to it. And that has been Bitcoin mining. We've got some pilots on the AI factory side that we're tiptoeing towards. And we are also very focused from a biz dev perspective just on other industry that, in our opinion, could be more flexible and just isn't. So it's really kind of the same platform, but it's what's turning on, what's turning off, and where can we bring this dimmer switch to an industry that would consider themselves flexible, but in a binary way. We want to make it more of a gradient to how they use power, and that's going to unlock a lot of great benefit for everybody.
Yeah, really interesting to see that opportunity emerge and evolve, because when you started OBM, there really was no one knew who Sam Altman was.
No, we didn't even have a power problem. We just had a driving problem. So Anything that I'm saying about the grid, that's all stuff that you just pick up and read about. And it's not too hard to go from zero to pretty good regarding the grid and holistically how it works. We didn't have an energy problem for ourselves. We were only 10 machines. It was running in a garage where nobody was around. Maybe it got a little warm and that was about it. But you fast forward and you start to listen to your user base a lot more, and you look at how they're transitioning to other industry and the problems that they're going to face on that. It all comes down to power. So we were at a very critical moment for the company. We had to say, how do we start solving these power problems, and how do we bring some innovation that just hasn't been unlocked before?
Dan, if someone wants to learn more about what you're working on or reach out to and get in touch, is LinkedIn the best place for someone to look you up?
LinkedIn, LinkedIn's great. I do read all of my LinkedIn DMs, so definitely feel free to shoot me a note and connect. Happy to hop on a call and chat with anybody. OBM.io is our site that we kind of lead forward with the brand. I also appreciate direct emails. I'm happy to hop on a call and chat with anybody. My email is dan@obm.io. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or just shoot me an email and let's hop on a call and chat through some creative problems or chat through some solutions we can find together.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll include links to your LinkedIn profile and your website and your LinkedIn company page so people can reach out more conveniently. But this has been really, really fascinating. It's interesting. This podcast is at about the 1.5 year mark. And I've noticed in the last couple of months, a lot more mainstream companies, executives in the industry are talking a lot more about generative AI with overlapping and adjacent to cryptocurrency related facilities as well. And I think based on what you're describing, there's so much to benefit from integrating and looking at the shared challenges and how you address those.
Fully agreed. A lot of lessons learned on the crypto side that can apply to an AI factory out of the gate. It's just getting the narrative to change a little bit and getting them to view themselves as less of a data center, more as an AI factory that's flexible and not flat. And once that narrative changes and people start to accept that or realize it, I think you'll see a lot more load flexibility innovation. And a lot of that's going to come by the pace that I think that's been set for the crypto industry.
Excellent. Been speaking today with Dan Lawrence, who's the CEO and co-founder of OBM in Baltimore, Maryland. Thanks so much for joining me, Dan.
Josh, thanks so much. Really enjoyed it.
Likewise.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.